Check out FlipsideGaming.com for all your gaming needs. Use the promo code HEROES to save 10% on all orders over $10 and support the channel at the same time. Hey there, this is John from Heroes and Legends, and welcome to Day 4 of Official Guilds of Ravnica Previews. And we have a lot of cards to recap and analyze for you today, so I want to get right into it. But just a fast reminder, if you check out the description below, you'll find a few ways to help support the channel, one of which is our Patreon page. You're also going to find links to products on Amazon down there. If you make any purchases on Amazon, once you go through that first link, we'll get a small percentage. Finally, Flipside Gaming still offering a promo code for our viewers, so check them out. Hopefully you can save some cash while you support the channel. As always, thank you not only to the folks that look at those links, but to all the viewers. Y'all make the channel what it is. But let's get into all the cards. Wizard showed the tokens off for the first time today, so we'll look at them briefly here. Angel, Soldier, Bird Illusion, Goblin, Insect, Elf, Knight, and a couple emblems, one for each of the Planeswalkers. Speaking of Planeswalkers, we finally got a look at that final Planeswalker from the Guilds of Ravnica Mythic Edition, Vraska, Golgari Queen. Now, we saw the regular version of this card yesterday and talked about it at great length, so we won't spend a lot of time on it today. But if you were curious what that last Planeswalker looks like, there she is. Venerated Loxodon. This is a white and 4 Elephant Cleric. It's a rare 4/4 with Convoke, and when this enters the battlefield, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature that convoked it. Okay, that's kind of interesting. I don't really see this one in Standard, though, because it's requiring a little too much setup. You have to have some little creatures, and then you're going to want to convoke them to really get the full value out of this card. And if you don't have that setup going, you don't want to spend 5 for a 4/4. That's just not good enough. And also, Convoke can be a little tricky at times, too, because if you're convoking your stuff, you're tapping it, which means you might be taking a turn off from actually using it, either tapping it for another ability or attacking. And you're also opening yourself up to a possible attack. Now, getting a 4/4 is nice. That's a good way to stave off some creatures. But if you're tapping a lot of stuff later in the game, it might not be good enough. In Limited, though, I think this is going to be really good for you. It works with Boros strategies. It's a card that's going to help those small mentor creatures get a little bit larger at times. And also, of course, with Convoke, it's going to fit into the Selesnya builds, too. This is a high draft pick, as well as it should be, being a rare. I think it will be very good in the Limited environment. City Watch Sphinx. This is a blue and 5 Sphinx. It's uncommon, 5/4 with flying. When this dies, you get to Surveil 2. Nothing crazy here, but it's actually a good limited card. I could see myself picking this uncommon relatively high. That's the theme for today, like really good uncommons for Drafter Sealed, and this is definitely one of those. You're going to play this. It's a 5/4 for just 6 mana with flying. It's got the evasion. It's got some nice stats behind it when it comes to power toughness. And then also Surveil 2 when it dies. Nice little consolation prize there as well. Mission Briefing. All right, this one's interesting. 2 blue, instant, rare, Surveil 2. Then choose an instant or sorcery card in your graveyard. You may cast that card this turn. If that card would be put into your graveyard this turn, exile it instead. Well, this is very reminiscent of everybody's favorite mage, Snapcaster Mage. This is an instant variant of that card, basically. Doesn't have the 2/1 body because it's not a creature, of course. Costs 2 blue, so it's 2 on color as opposed to the blue and 1, so a little harder to splash, obviously. But you do Surveil 2, which is kind of nice because if you're in trouble, maybe you're up against some graveyard hate, you still have a chance of hitting something relevant in a pinch. So I do like that. And also note that it doesn't target the card in the graveyard. It lets you choose, so that can be relevant at times as well. Put it all together. Do you play this card? Well, of course you play it. Let's talk Standard first. This is going to see a ton of Standard play. This is maybe not quite as good as Snapcaster because I do like having the 2/1 body. Many times that is relevant. But it's going to be pretty close in a lot of ways. So you're going to play this in Standard. You're going to be happy with it. Control decks are going to love this. If there's an Izzet burn/control deck, because we have been seeing a lot of interesting Izzet cards, maybe that's possible. If not right now, down the road, this will be in that deck. But even if that doesn't happen, just any control deck like the ones we have been seeing will love this card. It's going to be phenomenal. Limited, do you play it there? Of course you do, because you're going to be playing with removal spells that are instants and sorceries, right? And those are a premium when it comes to Drafter Sealed, so you're going to want to make the most of that, and if you're able to play one a second time out of your graveyard, you're going to be really happy to do it. Also, we're starting to see some payoffs now for Surveil, so there's a chance that that alone could matter, and that might be worth running the card too. So you're going to play it, you're going to be real happy with it. Commander, obviously, there's tons of great targets for this. It will feel like a redundancy maybe for decks that already run Snapcaster, but another version of that type of effect is going to be good there. The big question for me is how it works in some of the other formats that already have Snapcaster, like your Vintage, Legacy, Modern. I think you're going to see this get at least a little bit of play as people try it out and feel out which is better in certain circumstances. And maybe at some point you'll see maybe decks running one of these or one or two in the sideboard just to see how they run in comparison to Snapcaster. I still think Snapcaster overall is better, but that Surveil is at least interesting. And if a deck is okay supporting the 2 blue on color, they might give this a try. And I think that's what you're going to see at least early on. And some of that could stick in certain decks going forward. Thoughtbound Phantasm. It costs 1 blue. It's a spirit, uncommon 2/2 with Defender. Whenever you Surveil, put a +1/+1 counter on this. As long as this has 3 or more +1/+1 counters on it, it can attack as though it didn't have Defender. I was thinking about this card. One thing I thought about for Standard was maybe a win condition card for a control deck that's running a lot of Surveil. But the more I thought about it, I'm not really sold on that idea just because you're jumping through a lot of hoops to get a 5/5 creature with no hexproof, no evasion. That doesn't really feel like a win condition to me. It's cheap and you can kind of sneak it out without necessarily getting yourself in a situation where you're not holding on to enough mana for your counterspell or something like that. And that would be the plus side. But I do think you're going to find better options. We may even see some better options today, as a matter of fact. So I don't really feel it there. In Limited, though, I'd be happy to play this. As long as I have some Surveil, this could actually be a good little creature for me that can attack in early enough where it could still matter. Or it's just a 2/2 that is a Defender that I put down on turn 1 and gum up the ground and deal with some of those crazy Boros creatures coming at me or something like that. I can see myself main decking this probably more often than not, though, honestly, even if I don't have that much Surveil. Blood Operative, 2 black and 1, Vampire Assassin rare, 3/1 with lifelink. When this enters the battlefield, you may exile a target card from a graveyard. Whenever you Surveil, if this is in your graveyard, you may pay 3. If you do, return this to your hand. It's a persistent card. I do like those. A lot of times when you get these type of effects, they do go right from the graveyard to the battlefield, but typically when that happens, you can't block with them. So this is slower, it's a little clunkier, but at least you can block. The lifelink's interesting because hopefully at some point you just gain the 3 life, which will pay for it to come back and you'll stay at an equilibrium. If you can somehow get some damage across with this thing, then you will start gaining a little more significant life potentially. But that's the problem. I think it's a little slow and clunky for Standard. If it went right into the battlefield and it could be more aggressive, maybe then it would want to be in like a Rakdos build or something like that. But considering it's a little slow, you have to play it, it comes back into play, and then it's going to have Summoning Sickness before it can attack again, so on and so forth. I just think that it's a little slow there. In Limited, though, it's another fine rare. Like, I can see myself picking this relatively high. I do like the fact that it's persistent. Also, taking a key card out of a graveyard can be very helpful from time to time, so this is a fine Limited card, no doubt. Doom Whisperer. Alright, this one feels like a potential win condition, as a matter of fact, in Standard control, but 2 black and 3, it's a Nightmare Demon, Mythic Rare 6/6, flying Trample, pay 2 life, Surveil 2. So I do think Surveil is going to be really strong. Paying life to Surveil, in certain circumstances, could be good. Now, this also has flying Trample 6/6 for 5. That's why I think it will see at least a little Standard play. Maybe decks will run this as a backup win condition, if not a primary one, but I do think it will get there, at least in some capacity. Now, aside from that, Limited, yeah, it's a Mythic. You won't see it a lot, but it's obviously a bomb, as Mythic should be. So if you see this and you can play with it in Limited, go for it. It's going to be awesome for you. Outside there, though, I do think the casting cost is a little too much. There is the possibility here to pay life to fill your graveyard, which might be really good at Commander, actually, especially with the extra life you have. But when I'm thinking about Modern or Vintage or Legacy, I just feel like there's more efficient ways to do that type of thing. I mean, look at any Dredge deck, for example. So for 5 mana, I don't really see it crossing over there, but definitely a solid card for maybe the next Standard season and the other places I mentioned. Price of Fame. Here's another one I like. A black and 3 instant uncommon. This spell costs 2 less to cast if it targets a legendary creature. Destroy target creature, Surveil 2. Okay, let's talk Standard first. Is this better than Vraska's Contempt? No, probably not, but it's still an instant removal spell at 4. It's only 1 black, which is nice, so you can splash this into other decks that maybe aren't as devoted to black. I do like that as a possibility going forward in Standard. Also, when it comes to legendary creatures, there's some legendary creatures coming in this set that look pretty good. But there's also things out there like Nicol Bolas that are sticking around. If Nicol Bolas does well, this card gets a little bit better because of the price break there. Surveil, also very relevant. Surveil 2 attached to this. I think you're getting a lot here. This definitely sees Standard play, and It's going to work in conjunction with Vraska's Contempt, I think, and maybe even come out of the board against certain matchups. Or it might be in a deck that's not as devoted to black in lieu of Vraska's Contempt if they don't feel comfortable running that. But I think that's the role it's going to perform in Standard. This will be great for you in Limited. A very, very, very high pick, maybe first pickable in most packs, uncommon as a matter of fact for Draft. This is going to be awesome for you there. Commander, hey, Commanders are legendary, so that's kind of nice. This will work well in that format too. Erratic Cyclops. Red and 3, Cyclops Shaman. This one's a rare 0/8 with Trample. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell, this gets +X/+0 until end of turn, where X is that spell's converted mana cost. Alright, well, we've been talking about Izzets and maybe some spell-centric Izzet decks in Standard. If it gets there, it will kind of need some win conditions, right? Well, this is potentially one of those win conditions. Costs 4 mana, just 1 on color. I like that. It feels affordable enough. The 8 toughness is fantastic. You don't want this to be a 10/1 trample. Like, you want this to stick around, so the 8 toughness is very relevant. And if you play just a couple instants and sorceries, you can have a pretty big turn. You do that a couple times, and who knows, you really could whittle your opponent down to the point where some burn could finish them off. Imagine playing this with Mission Briefing. You pay 2 for the Mission Briefing, this gets a boost of +2/+0, and then you cast something outside of your graveyard, maybe even another cheap spell out of your hands. Plays well with Jumpstart too. You could potentially have a pretty big turn there. So, yeah, I do think this could see some Standard play if that type of deck can get there. Will it be right away? Will it be down the road? It's hard to say right now without seeing the rest of the set, but I do think it does have potential. In Limited, you know what? I'm probably still playing this card, even if I don't have a ton of instants and sorceries in my deck. Just being a forecasting cost 0/8 blocker is going to gum up the ground pretty nice. And you are going to have enough instants or sorceries that you could have a big moment. Even again, if you're just playing a removal spell for 4, 5, or 6, all of a sudden you can attack in with this thing with Trample and actually put a dent in whatever defense your opponent has. That alone might be worth the 4 mana, as a matter of fact. Commander, I know you're already thinking of ways to recycle those instants and sorceries out of your graveyard and have some huge turns with this thing, so go for it. It could be a lot of fun there too. Next card comes to us from a Russian language preview, so when we translate these cards, sometimes especially the names might be a little off, so keep that in mind. But loosely translated, this is a Wojciech, Bodyguard. Red and 2, Human Soldier, 3/3. It's a common with Mentor, can attack or block alone. I don't really see this doing a whole lot in Standard or anything like that, but if I am on the Boros Mentor plan in Draft or Seal, this will be a solid card for me. You can pick maybe a couple of these up, considering they're common. 3/3s, they do have to kind of work with other creatures. We've seen this drawback before. Not always a bad thing as long as you're very creature-centric. It has Mentor to boot, which is nice, and in conjunction with other Mentor creatures, this could be pretty solid for you in Limited. Affectionate Indrik. I love the art on this. Green and 5. It is a beast. Uncommon. 4/4. And when this enters the battlefield, you may have it fight target creature you don't control. Alright, it's a good Limited card. I don't have a whole lot else to say about it. 4/4 for 6 doesn't feel great, but it does fight, and green is always looking for removal spells that are going to be relevant and Limited, and this will be one of them. It can just kill a 3/3, and then you still have the 4/4. I think that's pretty nice. It can trade with a 4/4. So for 6 mana, I'm okay with it. It's a relatively high pick for me because I do want to prioritize any card, especially in green, that will work as removal. Aurelia, Exemplar of Justice. White, red, 2, legendary creature, angel. This is a mythic rare, 2/5 with flying. Mentor. At the beginning of combat on your turn, choose up to 1 creature you control. Until end of turn, that creature gets +2/+0, gains trample if it's red, gains vigilance if it's white. Note that it can target itself, so this can actually attack in as a 4/5 trample vigilance creature. That's not bad on its own, right? For 4 mana, it's actually really good. And it has Mentor too. So if it's targeting itself, that Mentor could be super relevant with 4 power. So does this see Standard play? I think it has potential. It's hard to say exactly what deck will go in. I don't know if I'm confident yet to say that Boros is good enough to have a Standard aggro deck. We're getting more and more pieces every day. This is a step closer to that, but I'm not sold on it yet. I think eventually, though, in some capacity, it will see at least a little Standard play. It's just solid and has enough power behind it where I don't think anything will stop it over time. But at least right away, it's got to find a home. Limited, yeah, it's going to be great in those Boros builds, but it is a mythic. This is going to be great in any deck as long as you can swing the casting costs. So you're going to be happy to run this whenever you get the opportunity. Commander, she's an angel, so she could be very relevant in those angel tribal builds, at least worth trying out. This next one is a Japanese language preview. It's Centaur Mediator, a white, a green, and 1 Centaur Cleric, 3/3. And this is a common. When this enters the battlefield, each player gains 4 life. Okay, well, I'm not super excited about this one. I'm not a big fan of reciprocal effects, unless I feel like I can guarantee the reciprocal effect's going to help me more than my opponents. I don't really see myself playing this card, honestly, unless I'm really desperate for a creature. And it is Selesnya, where creatures do matter a lot with Convoke, but if I can play something else, I'm going to try to play something else, honestly. Other than that, maybe I sideboard it in if I'm up against a really aggressive build like Boros, and that way I'm just taking too much early damage, so even though my opponent's still gaining 4 life, me gaining 4 life feels like I'm getting more out of it than they will in the long run. Maybe that's a scenario where I bring it in, but I'm stretching there. I do think this is kind of one of the dud cards that is going to be passed around last at the end of the draft pack. Conclave Guildmage, white, green, elf, cleric, another elf. Uncommon 2/2, pay a green and tap. Creatures you control gain trample till end of turn. White and 5 and tap. Create a 2/2 green and white elf knight creature token with vigilance. So this isn't going to quite make it into the standard knight deck. I just think these guild mages are really good in limited, but they're a little slow for standard typically because they have to tap to do much, and they're 2/2s. They're pretty fragile. But in limited, they can actually impact the board quite significantly and sometimes help you through board stalls. This is a perfect example of that. If I'm a little behind and I'm not drawing what I need to draw, I can create some 2/2 green white elf knight tokens, and that's actually pretty good. They have vigilance. I can sometimes maybe still attack in and defend myself. That feels decent. And then when I finally reach the point where we're at a board stall, but we're kind of at parity, and I need to push damage across, that first ability is going to help me do that. For just 1 green and tapping this, giving all my stuff trample could sometimes put away a game. So these are always pretty high draft picks for me. I really like Guild Mages, just generally this one is good too. Darkblade Agent, black, blue, and 1, human assassin, common 2/3. As long as you've survived this turn, this has Death Touch, and whenever this creature deals combat damage to a player, you draw a card. Alright, finally we're seeing some payoffs for surveilling, other than surveilling is just good on its own, which it kind of is. But this creature wants you to surveil. 2/3 for 3. Nice base stats to begin with, very limited playable, and when you do surveil, your opponent's got some decisions to make if you attack in, because this thing now is Death Touch, but if they let it go by, you're going to be drawing a card. It's got the Curiosity also for the turn. So that's a little awkward. They may actually have to let this trade with a better creature or more expensive creature to avoid you getting the card advantage, or they just kind of give up and let you take the card, and eventually that will catch up with them. Very, very good common that I would pick up relatively early in a draft, easily middle to higher pack pick. Here's another Russian language preview, Fortress Sergeant, white, red 3, Vyashino Soldier 3/3. This has double strike if you control a gate. It's a common. Alright, if you are all in on the gates and limited, then yeah, it's a good beater. I wouldn't play this if I'm only running like 1 or 2 gates though. I don't want to be paying 5 for a 3/3. That's not going to feel good. Make sure you're pretty confident that you're going to have a gate in play at some point. If you have like 5, 6 gates, if you drafted the gate strategy, then yeah, go for it. This will be a fine creature for you. Other than that, I'd probably avoid it if I can. Commander, there are people that do play gates in Commander. Here's another card for you to put into that deck. Glowspore Shaman. This is a black-green elf shaman, uncommon 3/1. Yet another elf. Interesting. When this enters the battlefield, put the top 3 cards of your library into your graveyard. You may put a land card from your graveyard on the top of your library. Alright, so finally, we see a card that actually is helping Undergrowth, and it's promoting you, milling yourself. I knew they were in here, just was wondering when we were going to see them. Finally, it happens. So for limited, yes, if you're on the Undergrowth plan, this is going to be pretty good for you. Also, it's a 3/1 body for 2, even though it is 2 different colors. I do like 3/1s for 2 in limited. Sometimes they underperform, but many times they either punish your opponent for stumbling on their colors or their mana early on, and they can do 3 or 6 points of damage. That can be quite good. Or they just trade up, and I'm happy with that as well. So the stats are good. The ability is going to be good in a lot of decks. The fact that you can also put a land on top of your library, you don't have to, so don't tempo yourself if you don't need to. But many times, especially if you're going deeper in colors like a 3rd or 4th color, that could actually be pretty relevant to help you smooth out what's going on with your deck. So I like it in that capacity as well. Very good limited card. Maybe it's not for every build. If you don't need what it's doing, then you could skip it probably in lieu of something else. But I see myself playing this probably more often than not if I'm in these colors and draft or sealed, honestly. What about Standard? Could it get there? Well, if Undergrowth ever does become a thing of Standard, and again, that's a leap, we have to see a lot more from this set before I'm there, then this would be an enabler card in that deck. Lazav the Multifarious. Great name. This is another mythic. Black-blue legendary creature shapeshifter 1/3. When this enters the battlefield, surveil 1. Pay X. This becomes a copy of target creature card in your graveyard with converted mana cost X. Except, its name is still Lazav the Multifarious, because that name's awesome. It's legendary in addition to its other types, and it has this ability. Wow, okay. So this is a 1/3 for 2, even if you don't activate it, which is okay stats, especially in blue. You want to defend yourself sometimes, come up the ground from the small creatures. But where this really shines is later in the game when you can start turning it into stuff in your graveyard. So you do have to pay X. This is a little reminiscent of Varath Shapeshifter to me. I was always curious why that card didn't do better, maybe in like Legacy or Vintage, because I do think it's a powerful card. And I've tested with it before and had some success. This card is similar. It's a little different, but similar in some ways. So let's talk about where it's going to be good. Standard, are you going to play it there? I think there's potential. This is a hard one to wrap my head around, though, because you have to figure out where it's going to be at its best. It probably wants to be in a deck where there's a lot of different creatures and you can kind of decide what you need at any given moment. Also, if you mill yourself and get some strong creatures into your graveyard, like win condition, hexproof, flying, trample creatures, that type of thing, the card's going to be a little bit better there. But you still need the mana to activate it and turn it into that creature. So sometimes I just got to wonder, wouldn't it just be better, instead of milling myself and trying to turn this card into the good creature, to just draw cards and play the good creature and cut out the middleman? And I think most of the time that's going to be better unless you have some tricks. Are there going to be tricks available in Standard that are good enough and fast enough? Well, maybe down the road, but I don't know if there's anything right now, at least that I can think of. So I don't know if it's going to be great there, at least not right away. It could do some things, though. I'm sure someone will stumble upon something at some point. Commander, this is going to shine in Commander, obviously, just because you're going to have a lot of great targets for this thing. You're going to have a lot of disposable mana. It's going to allow you to go back to your graveyard and turn this into a lot of different stuff. And this is where the crazy combos can start coming in, because this can change on the fly. You can attack in with one creature, like say an unblockable creature of some kind, and then you could turn this into phage after it is unable to be blocked. And when you get to damage, you just knock that opponent out of the game. So that's kind of amazing, right? So those are the type of things this can do. Phyrexian Dreadnought, another great combo with this because it's cheap. You can play it, decide not to sacrifice the stuff, and then you put the Dreadnought in the graveyard. So it's very easy to get in the graveyard, very easy to turn this into the Dreadnought, and it can just be down. So there's a lot of crazy combos. We won't list them all here because we could probably make a whole other video series on that. But there's some really good ones, trust me. Are any of these viable, though, for a format like Legacy or Vintage? Maybe. Perhaps there is a deck that's using some of those combos in Vintage or Legacy. We're going to have to see what people come up with. Might take a little time for someone to brew the right thing. And you got to ask yourself, ultimately, is that going to be better than just like a Through the Breach style deck? Is it going to be faster than that kind of deck? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. We just have to kind of stumble on the right formula. It's going to take a lot of testing, probably a little bit of time, but I think it's possible. Modern, you don't have as many crazy combos to go for, but you still have a lot, so it has potential there too. Again, I would be a little more skeptical, though, for modern success, because Through the Breach style decks just might be better or faster in that format, because you don't have access to some of the other crazy combo cards I just mentioned. But who knows? There's a lot of things I'm sure I'm not thinking of right off the bat. After all that, I haven't mentioned Limited yet. I do think it's going to be good in Limited, just because you have the capacity later in the game to go back and turn this into your best creatures that have died, or maybe you ended up milling into the graveyard or what have you. So if that's the case, yeah, later in the game, you can turn this into a relevant creature with trample or evasion, and it could be quite good for you. So very playable for just 2 mana. And like I said, those base stats aren't bad either. So there you go. If nothing else, this is going to be a fun card. It's going to lead to some big moments, no doubt. League Guildmage. Here's another Guildmage. Red, blue, human wizard, uncommon 2/2. Blue and 3, tap, draw a card. Always like that. Red and X, tap, copy target instant or sorcery spell you control with converted mana cost X. You may choose new targets for the copy. So that fork can be maybe a little expensive, but very relevant, especially if you have economical instants and sorceries. Drawing a card, though, I mean, that's good enough for me. I'm happy to play that in Limited, even if I don't have that many instants and sorceries. But like I've been saying, you're going to have some, definitely. So I do think in a game of Draft or Sealed, on average, maybe you could activate that perhaps one time out of a series of 3 games and be pretty happy with the results. But drawing a card, that's always gold. So yeah, this is definitely worth picking up pretty early in a draft yet again. Legion Guild Mage. Red, white, human wizard, uncommon, 2/2. Pay a red and 5. This will deal 3 damage to each opponent. White and 2 and tap another target creature. Tapping down a creature for just 3. Nowadays, that's good economy. In the old days, you could do that for like 1 white, but nowadays, you're going to be real happy with that. And if you're in a board stall, guess what? That first ability will treat you very, very well. Early on, if you're just ahead enough to attack by tapping down something else, you can get some early damage in. Later on, when you're stuck and staring at your opponent doing the whole draw-go thing, 6 mana, take 3. Next turn, 6 mana, take 3. Opponent's not going to last all that long if that keeps up. Another really strong limited card, another high uncommon draft pick. Nightveil Predator. 2 black, 2 blue, vampire, uncommon 3/3 flying, death touch, hexproof. Another card that feels like a good control win condition because it's hard to deal with. The worst thing about this card, though, is the casting cost. It's not very forgiving. 2 black and 2 blue. It's asking for precise mana, but I don't necessarily think that decks in Standard will have too much of a problem with that. So we are seeing some good Dimir cards today that are replacing some of the ones that are being lost. Now, maybe nothing as good as the Scarab God or anything like that, but some solid ones. Maybe we will see an Esper control deck or something like that. If that's the case, this could be a part of it. In Limited, another really, really strong uncommon, another high draft pick here. Knight of Autumn, white, green 1, Dryad Knight, rare 2/1. When this enters the battlefield, choose 1. Put 2 +1/+1 counters on this, or destroy target artifact or enchantment, or you gain 4 life. Wow, okay, maybe one of the best cards in the set, actually. And the reason I say that is because Reclamation Sage sees tons of play all over the place. That card has shown up in Modern, Legacy, Vintage, and this is a very similar card with lots of upside. Now, yes, there's white in the casting cost, sure. It can destroy target artifact or enchantment when it enters the battlefield. Or if you don't need to do that, you can actually just increase the size of this thing. Instead of being a 2/1, now it can be a 4/3. Or if maybe you need to gain life, you're up against an aggressive deck or something, you can just gain 4 life. The versatility is tremendous. We already know how good Reclamation Sage is, and like I said, that change in the casting cost isn't going to deter me from playing this at all. So yes, this sees play basically everywhere. Modern Collective Company decks will like this. Sideboard sometimes, but there will be many times where you can just simply main deck this because it's good enough on its own. You don't even have to worry about exactly what your matchup is necessarily. Yes, I do think this could see Legacy and Vintage play as well, much like Reclamation Sage has in the past. Standard, absolutely. Doesn't matter what kind of deck we're talking about here. If you're in these colors, you're going to think about playing this card. It's going to be that good, that versatile for you. It is a knight too, so maybe that's a place to start. Limited, first pickable rare for sure, for all the same reasons. Even if you don't have an artifact or enchantment you're too concerned about, this is just a really solid creature for 3 regardless. Fantastic card here. This one is incredible. Now this one's a Russian language preview, but it's actually a reprint of Sky Knight Legionnaire. So there's a recent printing of the card on your left side there. On the right's the new printing. It is a common yet again. And yeah, these are good. They're nothing crazy, but they are very playable. They can do some work for you some of the time. They're a little fragile for 3, but they do have haste, which is nice. Where this could be better this time around, though, is with the other mentor cards. So if you can mentor this a little bit, now make it a 3/3 flyer, 4/4 flyer, all of a sudden it gets a little bit better for what you're paying for it. So it's not necessarily always going to make your cut, but I think many times if you're in these colors, especially with mentor, you'll probably be playing it in Draft and Sealed. Orcrin Assassin, green, black, and 1. It's an uncommon elf assassin, 1/1, death touch. All creatures able to block Orcrin Assassin do so. Wow, okay, so it's got death touch, it's got lore built in. Not bad for 3 mana. I'm going to say this, though, adjust expectations just a little bit on this card because it does cost 3, 2 different colors. It comes in as a 1/1. It's a little fragile. And you can't attack right away. It doesn't have haste. So you can deter an attack, obviously, with this on the battlefield. But it's telegraphing what you're about to do, right? So your opponent has a little time to answer this. If they can't answer it, they might be in trouble, especially later in the game in a board stall. You could just attack with this, and then all your other creatures will get by, game over. In the middle of the game, though, you could attack with this. If you have a combat trick, that could be a bad day for your opponent. If you can pump this thing, it takes out like 3 creatures or 4 creatures or something. That could be kind of insane. So it is very good. It has lots of potential, but don't overvalue its strength because there are times where it's not going to be as good as you feel like it's going to be. You'll be in a situation where you play it and your opponent can just get rid of it because it's only 1 toughness. Or they'll be able to tap down the creatures that they care about because they have abilities that tap them or what have you. It might not get the punch across that you're expecting, but other times it's going to be amazing. So you're going to play it for those times. And again, it is a pretty high draft pick on common just because it's a strong card generally. I think it's a little too slow and clunky for standard, a little fragile for that, but in limited, it's still a very, very good card. Here's a Chinese simplified language preview. It's True Fire Captain. It's another one of these 4 on-color spells. 2 white, 2 red, creature, human knight, 4/3, uncommon with Mentor. And when this is dealt damage, it deals equal damage to target player. It's not quite Boris Rekner because it can't hit creatures. It can only hit the player. So it feels alright. To me, this is more of a limited card. It's a fine one. Maybe not as high pick as some of the other uncommons we've been seeing today, but I do think it's just fine. Little bit more difficult to cast, again, being 2 white and 2 red, but it has Mentor, so it does play into that strategy very well. 4/3 are some pretty nice stats, especially with Mentor. You have a lot of power there, which is pretty nice. And that ability is going to be relevant, definitely. At some point, your opponent's going to have to deal with this thing, and it means they're going to be taking some damage when they do it, and there's nothing wrong with that, considering what you're paying. Another card I don't see in the standard Knight deck or anything, but ultimately, it's fine and limited. Integrity and Intervention. This is one of the split cards, obviously, and on your left side is the hybrid side, so you have just 1 hybrid, Boros mana. Instant, both sides are instant, uncommon. Target creature gets +2/+2 till end of turn. Some decent combat trick, also plays well with Mentor and that whole concept. Intervention, white, red, and 2, instant. It deals 3 damage to any target, and you gain 3 life. So basically, expensive Lightning Helix. I like it in limited. It's going to be great. I mean, even though expensive Lightning Helix is still going to be really good, and Integrity could also come in handy from time to time. So, much like in life. So, I do think that I can see myself, again, picking this relatively high when I see it show up in a draft. Another really good limited uncommon. The big theme of the day. Standard, maybe it sees a little play. I could see this being in the sideboard of an aggro deck for mirror matches, maybe. The 4 for the Helix is a little expensive. If it was 3, I'd be a little higher on this card and a little more confident in it, but I do think it will see at least a little bit of standard play somewhere. Alright, with that being said, those are the cards for today. Whole bunch of them. Again, a lot of really cool uncommons this time around. We saw some interesting mythics too. A lot of fun cards in the set, no doubt. I can't wait to actually play with these. So tomorrow we're going to be back again with another recap session of all the cards that are previewed. So we'll look at everything that comes out between now and then. I'm assuming things will be quiet on the weekend. Saturday, we will do our market watch as we normally do. If any cards get previewed, we'll talk about them later in the weekend as well. Then next week, Monday and Tuesday, will be previews, and we'll begin our full set review on Wednesday. Until then, hey, thanks for watching. Please remember to like and subscribe, and have a great day. Hey, thanks for watching. This video is made possible by the generous support of viewers like you on Patreon. Check out the description below for links to our Patreon page as well as our Amazon affiliate store, where a small percentage of all sales will also help support the channel. Finally, if you haven't had a chance yet to subscribe, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any new videos on Heroes and Legends. Talk to you again soon, and have a great day.